For decades, a sealed safe stood hidden behind a false panel in King Charles's private Sandringham study. Thought to be a mere relic of the past, no one imagined the vault would hold items so inflammatory, so haunting, that their exposure would send shockwaves through the highest halls of power. When the vault was finally cracked open during a routine renovation, investigators did not expect to uncover a trail of secrets buried for generations. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. What began as a casual refurbishment of a rarely used wing quickly turned into a scene of hushed whispers and tightened security. The moment workers pried back the crumbling panel, revealing the edge of an unfamiliar iron door coated in rust and time, palace officials were summoned within the hour. Dismissed initially as some Victorian artifact with no real value, the safe might have stayed undisturbed, if not for a peculiar key discovered in Charles's ceremonial desk drawer, engraved with markings not seen on any other royal lock. It was a locksmith's curiosity that urged further exploration. But when the key fit too perfectly into the untouched safe, alarms were metaphorically triggered. Two senior aides to the king unexpectedly objected to opening it, claiming the contents were of no public interest and should remain untouched, an odd response to what was supposedly just dust and documents. Their hesitation, however, only fueled suspicion, and with legal clearance obtained through obscure royal warrant clauses, a private investigative unit was brought in under absolute discretion. The lock groaned with defiance, as if warning them all. But when it finally turned, and the heavy door creaked open, silence fell. Inside were no jewels, no war medals, no family heirlooms. What they found were files aged, yellowing, meticulously stacked. Each bundle was tied with ribbons, some black, some navy, some crimson. Labels bore no standard references, only enigmatic phrases: Appendix Windsor 4, Custodial Clarion, for review upon emergency succession. And deeper still were personal letters, sealed envelopes, and fragments of parchment that should not have existed outside the royal archives. One investigator reportedly stepped back in stunned disbelief, whispering, "This wasn't hidden, it was buried. These weren't just old papers, they were records someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to conceal." But what lay within wasn't just a forgotten pile of papers. It was a coded archive that pointed to something far more disturbing, and someone who had gone to great lengths to keep it buried. Among the aged parchment, one bundle stood out, delicate vellum sheets marked Codex, Windsor 4. The handwriting matched Queen Elizabeth's personal annotations, but these entries had never appeared in the official royal archives. Why were they here? Who moved them? And more chillingly, why were pages missing, torn precisely at the points where Catherine's name was mentioned? The discovery of the Codex was not merely an archival anomaly, it was a revelation with the power to destabilize long-held assumptions about royal succession. As investigators unwrapped the silk ribbon and scanned the ink faded by time, it became immediately clear that this was no ordinary ledger of royal correspondence. Forensic experts brought in to examine the sheets confirmed what palace officials had feared. The penmanship was indisputably that of Queen Elizabeth II herself, crafted with her signature slant and margin codes used only in her personal records. But the content was what unsettled everyone. Scrawled between lines of stiff formality were cryptic directives, references to Protocol Clarion, the elusive obsidian key, and a chilling command that read, "Her custodial right shall not be disputed." These weren't ceremonial notes. They were encoded instructions, perhaps for a time of crisis, and almost certainly not meant for public consumption. The deeper investigators delved into the Codex, the more they noticed an alarming pattern. Sections that mentioned Catherine, even indirectly, had been methodically mutilated. Pages had been excised with precision, leaving behind jagged edges and broken sentences, as though someone had tried to erase her from this alternate line of succession without drawing attention. What had those missing sections once declared? Had the Queen envisioned a stabilizing role for Catherine long before the public ever saw her as a potential monarch? One thing became clear: the Codex abruptly ended in 1995, a detail that raised eyebrows across the investigative team. That was the same year Diana completed her private royal audit, an action cloaked in silence. its contents sealed and locked away from public scrutiny. Was it coincidence that both women, one a monarch, the other a future queen in the people's eyes, had drafted confidential documents during the same volatile period? Or was this a coordinated attempt to reroute the monarchy's future? Before tragedy could steal it away, palace aides, when questioned, refused to acknowledge the codex's existence in any official capacity. However, internal chatter indicated that Charles himself had, at some point, quietly removed key documents from the royal archives. What was his motive? Was it protection or obstruction? The implication that a reigning monarch may have selectively altered access to foundational succession texts cast a long, dark shadow over the House of Windsor. And as analysts examined the codex's language more closely, a chilling possibility emerged that it had been used not to preserve tradition, but to reshape it in secrecy. The public was never supposed to see this. The firm was never supposed to speak of it. Yet here it was, unsealed, undeniable, and dangerously unfinished. But this was only the beginning, because deeper inside the safe was a sealed folder with no markings, save for a wax imprint, not of the royal arms, but of a forgotten royal council, sealed in wax and dated with a year that didn't match any known royal protocol, 1997, Appendix Windsor 4. This document had no official precedent. The title alone sent tremors through those who knew what it implied. What was the appendix the public was never supposed to see? And why did it suggest the existence of an emergency succession plan, bypassing both Parliament and tradition? The wax itself bore an unfamiliar insignia, neither the royal arms nor the usual emblems of council authority, but rather a forgotten mark traced back to the Clarion Council, an advisory body dissolved decades earlier under mysterious circumstances. The parchment inside had yellowed, but its language was clear and unnervingly deliberate. It described what it called an emergency continuity protocol, to be invoked only in the case of irreversible disruption to national stability or personal incapacitation within the sovereign line. It was drafted in the direct aftermath of Diana's death, a moment that had sent the monarchy reeling, and its very existence pointed to a fear the public had never been allowed to consider, that the royal bloodline, left unchecked, might one day tear itself apart from within. The document bore 3 signatures that confirmed its weight: Queen Elizabeth II, Prince Philip, and stunningly, Lord Mountbatten Windsor, long believed to have had no role in constitutional preparation at that late stage. His involvement signaled something even deeper. This wasn't merely a panic response. It had the hallmarks of long-term planning, stretching back through a lineage of quiet royal minds who had always feared the throne's vulnerability in times of internal betrayal. The text spoke of suspension of ceremonial influence when the spirit of continuity outweighs the rigidity of tradition. In coded language, it granted custodial power to unnamed stabilizers during such moments, allowing decisions to be made in silence, away from public scrutiny, away from Parliament, and even away from the reigning monarch if circumstances demanded. This was no hypothetical. This was a veiled threat to Charles's future, if deemed unfit by a silent vote of royal conscience. What shook investigators most, however, was a name written not as heir nor consort, but as stabilizing heir apparent in recessive continuity path. It was the first documented mention of Catherine in a strategic succession context, years before her public engagement to Prince William. The phrasing placed her outside the bloodline but within its protection, described as a vessel through which the crown may breathe anew should tradition fail its people. The implications were staggering. Not only had Catherine been on the radar of those crafting emergency protocols, but her elevation may have been discussed before she had formally entered the royal sphere. Who gave that suggestion form? Was it Elizabeth preparing a back-channel safeguard, or Mountbatten maneuvering beyond the grave? Appendix Windsor 4 had been sealed not to preserve order, but to protect a contingency plan Britain was never meant to see. It wasn't just a document. It was a blueprint for bypassing the crown in moments of moral collapse. And its very existence implied that those closest to the throne feared not just the outside world, but each other. Yet if Catherine's role was quietly elevated through secret documents, what else had Charles tried to suppress? The next discovery inside the safe would rock the very identity of Britain's royal legacy. Tucked beneath layers of paper was an envelope marked "Do Not Display." Inside, an oil painting. The subject, a young Catherine, but not as we've ever seen her. She stood adorned in regalia that had never been worn publicly, wearing a tiara believed lost, holding a ceremonial scroll never issued to her. Was this merely artistic imagination, or a prophetic portrayal suppressed by those fearing its accuracy? The canvas pulsed with symbolic power, so precise and loaded with meaning that it could not be dismissed as coincidence. Experts called in for authentication confirmed its origin as early 2000s, years before Catherine had officially stepped into the royal spotlight. Yet the woman in the portrait bore not only her unmistakable likeness, but a royal bearing that suggested this was no passive M. This was an intentional depiction of power, an anointing painted in silence. The artist's name had been removed from the lower right-hand corner, but its stylistic signature aligned with a known royal portraitist who had abruptly stopped receiving commissions around the same time this work was estimated to be completed. The timing, the secrecy, the scale, it all pointed to a project buried under layers of deliberate erasure. The tiara atop Catherine's head was the first anomaly. Experts recognized its design immediately: Queen Victoria's lost diadem, long believed destroyed during World War II. Yet there it was, rendered in exquisite detail, unmistakably present on her brow. Why would an artist include an artifact believed extinct? Unless, of course, it wasn't. And if the tiara existed in secret royal possession, what else had been kept hidden? More chilling still was the object in Catherine's hand, a ceremonial scroll with gold leaf trim, bound in blue ribbon, bearing a faint Latin engraving. Analysts enhanced the image and translated the text: Custodia Sanguinis Clarion, keeper of the Clarion bloodline. The phrase had never appeared in public royal discourse, yet it directly aligned with references found in Appendix Windsor 4. This wasn't artistic liberty, it was coded authority. When confronted about the painting, a former royal aide disclosed under confidentiality that Charles had personally intervened to prevent the piece from being included in a planned Windsor exhibition. His justification? Security purposes. No further explanation was offered, no record of its commission could be located, and no photographs were permitted. Yet its placement in the safe, wrapped and hidden, not destroyed, spoke volumes. It had not been discarded. It had been preserved for a time when it could be understood, or perhaps justified. Was this portrait a quiet prophecy that eightened Charles's perception of control? Or was it a private declaration of Catherine's destined ascension, blessed by those who had seen something in her no title could bestow? The emotional undercurrent beneath the brushstrokes was undeniable. This was not just art, it was vision. It told a story of power that did not rely on coronations or bloodlines, but on quiet preparation, trust, and unseen favor. And though its creator remains hidden, its message had already begun to echo far beyond the vault. But if a hidden portrait could whisper of a secret coronation, the audio recordings found sealed beneath it would scream accusations far louder. On brittle cassette reels labeled only with dates, investigators heard a voice unmistakably belonging to Charles. But these weren't official recordings. They were private confessions, raw fears, and unsettling hypotheticals. In one chilling passage, Charles rages about betrayal, obscure ceremonies, and his terror that the bloodline is turning against me. What was he referring to? And why did he say he'd already lost Anne to the Clarion Pact? The tapes, crackling with age and emotion, were never meant to surface. Buried beneath the painting and sealed in unmarked envelopes, their discovery added an entirely new dimension to the safe's contents, one of internal collapse, of a monarch unraveling under pressure no public statement ever hinted at. The first recording begins calmly enough, with Charles reflecting on duty, transition, and the burden of legacy. But within minutes, the tone shifts. His voice tightens. He references unnamed advisors in shadow and speaks of a Clarion Council acting without mandate, but with conviction. Then comes the admission, his belief that Anne, his sister, had crossed into quiet rebellion, aligning herself with an alternative path for the crown, one that did not require his blessing to move forward. What followed was a descent into paranoia laced with tragic awareness. Charles, once composed, sounds fractured. He laments the weight of Diana's memory as a weapon reshaping the monarchy in his absence. He expresses fear not of foreign threats or public opinion, but of those closest to him. "Edward wants the vault," he mutters. He thinks the past should be unsealed, but they don't understand what it contains, what it means, what it will unleash. Over and over he returns to one focal point, Catherine, not as an enemy, not even as a rival, but as an inevitability. He fears her grace, her presence, her unshakable composure in the face of chaos. "She doesn't need a throne," he says in one anguished moment. "She becomes it, simply by standing still." These weren't the musings of a calculating monarch. These were the confessions of a man watching the institution he swore to protect transform in ways he could not control. He admits, in halting tones, that he removed multiple documents from the royal archives following Diana's funeral. Not out of malice, he claims, but to contain the questions that would break the house apart. Each tape reveals more than the last, not through facts, but through fear. Charles speaks of rituals no longer practiced, oaths taken in the blue room behind closed doors, and an inherited key, meant to remain unused until it wasn't. His breakdowns aren't theatrical, they're haunted, laced with regret. He knows what's coming. He sees the pieces moving long before they reach the public. And yet he doesn't fight them, he hides from them, silencing what he can, burying what he can't face. But no voice could prepare Britain for the final item in the safe, a legal codicil so destabilizing it had been hidden in plain sight for over 2 decades. At the bottom of the vault, wrapped in cloth embroidered with Diana's initials, lay a sealed envelope marked, "To be delivered only upon full constitutional review." Inside a handwritten codicil dated weeks before her death. What it revealed changed everything. Diana hadn't just predicted the crisis Britain now faced, she had prepared for it, and in her final words, she left no doubt who she believed should carry the monarchy's soul forward. The moment the envelope was opened, time seemed to stall. Her familiar cursive, both elegant and fierce, filled the pages with a clarity that pierced decades of silence. The document was not vague, nor was it ceremonial. It was decisive, deliberate, and above all, protective. Legally witnessed and dated after her divorce from Charles, the codicil bore the authority of a woman who knew she would no longer be shielded by the palace's hand, and yet still chose to speak into the future. She addressed not the institution, but the conscience of the nation. And in a breathtaking declaration, she described Catherine not by name, but unmistakably as the embodiment of grace I once lacked time to fully become. This wasn't a passing compliment, it was a passing of intention. A confession that her own arc had been interrupted, and a hope that someone else might finish what she had barely begun. She went further. Diana explicitly stated that symbolic heirlooms, items she once fought to protect, should be withheld from Camilla and instead entrusted to the woman whose silence speaks louder than pageantry. She emphasized that legacy must never be measured in titles or protocols, but in presence and empathy. 2 qualities she believed Catherine would wield better than anyone before her. Perhaps most astonishing was her plea to future decision-makers. When the time comes, weigh not the bloodline, but the balance of heart and heritage. It was a quiet revolution wrapped in calligraphy, and it dared to rewrite the laws of reverence. Diana's final wish was not for vengeance, but for realignment, a reminder that a crown without compassion is nothing more than a symbol rusting on a pedestal. The codicil also confirmed the existence of her private journals entries spanning her final year that she claimed had been entrusted to Alexandra, presumably Princess Alexandra of Kent, with the instruction that they remain sealed until the appointed guardian emerges. That phrase, appointed guardian, would echo hauntingly through palace halls for weeks to come. What stunned investigators and advisors alike was not just the depth of foresight, but the eerie precision. Diana had written these words in a time of personal upheaval, with no promise of being heard. Yet everything she feared fractures within the house: public disillusionment, The threat of an heir adrift had manifested, piece by piece. And she had already chosen a path forward, hidden in an envelope no one dared open. The codicil raised more than constitutional questions, it reignited emotional succession, a concept never debated in Parliament but always present in the court of public opinion. Had the Queen known about this? Had Charles? And if so, had this been the reason for so many locked doors and veiled gestures in the years since? But as the public demanded answers, attention turned not just to what was in the safe, but why it was hidden. And the next revelation put the spotlight on the most silent royal of all. For years, Princess Anne was called the monarchy's steadiest hand, stoic, dutiful, loyal. But the documents uncovered in the safe reveal she may have been quietly steering the royal transition all along. Her coded communications with private couriers, her presence at unrecorded meetings, and her hand-drawn annotations on Protocol Clarion all suggest a long-running chess game, one that kept Catherine in play and Camilla permanently sidelined. Hidden within the sealed folders was a curious collection of handwritten notes in Anne's unmistakable cursive, tucked between pages bearing the Clarion seal. On them were phrases like stabilization measures, preferred air preservations, and vault movement must match alignment timing. These weren't idle scribbles. They were instructions, evidence of a long game, and possibly even Anne's secret blueprint for the crown's future, beyond her brother's influence. Her personal secretary, now retired, was quietly approached. What they confirmed changed the perception of Anne's quiet obedience forever. Not only had Anne travelled regularly to Windsor for unlisted meetings, but those meetings had been kept off all official court circulars and royal diaries. The implication? These weren't ceremonial discussions. They were decisions covert, strategic, and likely preemptive. Further inside the investigation, a redacted set of minutes from a 2007 council session revealed a single, jarring sentence. Princess Royal expresses formal objection to consort elevation, cites instability risk, and unendorsed precedents. That note was later scrubbed from official records, but the original typed version, initialed AEW, left no doubt who had spoken. This was Anne refusing to endorse Camilla's rise. And more than that, it was Anne acting not as a silent observer, but as a gatekeeper. Additional whispers emerged from Balmoral, where a sealed wing of the estate had long been thought to house archival overflow. But now, speculation swirled that Anne had stored key sections of Appendix Windsor there, under her personal jurisdiction, beyond the immediate reach of Charles or the Crown estate. If true, this meant Anne had insulated herself with constitutional leverage for years and protected Diana's buried intentions with the force of legacy, not emotion. And that brings us to the most painful question of all. Anne, all along the quiet keeper of Diana's legacy. Had she taken the heartbreak and chaos of her brother's unraveling marriage and turned it into a doctrine of quiet resistance? Her actions, once seen as apolitical, now carried new weight. In hindsight, Anne's relentless effort to elevate Catherine into significant royal patronages wasn't just an act of kindness, it was positioning. Slowly, steadily, methodically placing Catherine where public respect and symbolic trust would follow. Art, mental health, military service, early childhood. Each new role reinforced the narrative Anne had been quietly scripting, and all of it pointed to one unavoidable conclusion. Anne wasn't just a loyal sister. She was the monarchy's invisible strategist, working through shadows and preparing for a future that bypassed Charles's chosen path. But while Anne played the long game, Camilla had her own play, and what she didn't know was that every step she took was being recorded in a separate file titled Counterbalance Strategy, Windsor Firm. The final file recovered from the vault was titled Counterbalance Dossier, updated as of 2021. Its contents were cold, surgical, and damning. It contained detailed plans not to elevate Camilla, but to ensure her influence never matched Diana's shadow or Catherine's rising light. The plan was authored not by a single hand, but by a silent consensus within the house itself. This was no idle collection of strategy notes. It was a fully structured dossier, bearing multiple initials from senior advisors, archival stewards and high-ranking, members of the internal royal advisory apparatus. It laid out, line by line, how Camilla's presence would be managed, not enhanced. Her engagements were to be ceremonial, never symbolic. Her voice allowed in patronage but never in preservation. The core objective was unmistakable: contain the impact of Camilla without igniting public backlash, and elevate Catherine subtly, yet irreversibly, as the face of emotional continuity and cultural trust. One segment of the document laid bare the intended power balance. While Camilla could be seen beside the crown, she would never speak for it. In direct contrast, Catherine was to be ushered into roles of historical stewardship, given access to archival projects, invited to lead royal commemorations, and entrusted with the intangible yet potent weight of symbolic heritage. Charles, when consulted, had reportedly been advised against granting Camilla custodianship over any legacy items tied to the late Queen or Diana. The language was clinical. Camilla lacked lineal resonance, while Catherine had continuity potential. That distinction, once buried behind smiles and staged photographs, was now laid bare in a document designed to reshape perception from within. The most unsettling revelation, however, was the timing. The dossier had been updated even after Charles's health began to decline, proof that the planning did not hinge on his consent, but moved forward regardless of it. This was not a reflection of chaos, but of control. Royal insiders later admitted under pressure that this document had been brought into private meetings, used as a benchmark to measure how engagements were allocated, how appearances were managed, and how media narratives were seeded. There were even explicit instructions to avoid public comparisons between Camilla and Catherine in speeches, press releases, and official ceremonies, an effort not to protect Camilla, but to prevent her from becoming a competitor to the future. They were engineering. Her path had been quietly defined, her ceiling strategically enforced. For years the public had been told that unity reigned within the royal household. But this dossier proved otherwise. There was no unity, only a managed illusion. Beneath it, silent wars of influence and legacy had unfolded, with Catherine at the center of a long-term consolidation, and Camilla cast as the crown's limit rather than its light. The people who built this plan didn't oppose Camilla with malice, they did it with mathematics. They knew which name history would preserve. But as Britain tried to process these revelations, one final twist remained, because buried in the last compartment of the safe was something no one expected: a blood-sealed will fragment from the Queen Mother herself. It was never meant to be found again. A single page sealed with a droplet of the Queen Mother's blood, a tradition long believed extinct. The wax emblem read, "For the one who keeps the line unbroken." The words inside were fewer than 50, but they confirmed everything Britain had begun to suspect. The future had never been in Charles's hands. It had always belonged to someone else. The page was folded with a care that defied time, preserved in a velvet pouch, stitched with the Queen Mother's crest, tucked behind the last compartment in the safe, sealed not just by wax, but by inte. The handwriting was unmistakable, the ink slightly faded but legible, and the message devastating in its clarity. Custodial guidance, it declared, must rest with the vessel of stability, not with the bearer of name alone. That sentence shattered the already cracking illusion of orderly succession. Beneath it, just one chilling line: "To the girl whose silence speaks where legacy screams, give the line's breath." There was no name, but there didn't need to be. Within the context of every buried document, every strategic maneuver, every quiet refusal, the meaning was unmistakable. Catherine, never loud, never rebellious, but always present, was the one envisioned long before she even entered the public eye. The Queen Mother had written these words years before Diana's codicil. This wasn't a last-minute safeguard. This was the first seed planted in an orchard of contingency, long before the current crisis, and rooted in a vision of survival beyond chaos. It raised staggering questions. What role had the Queen Mother really played in shaping the royal future behind Elizabeth's reign? And how many knew her will had lingered, locked away, awaiting a moment of irreversible doubt in the House of Windsor? When palace officials were approached, the official response was sterile: "No comment at this time." But inside royal circles, panic was palpable. Emergency sessions were called, not to dismiss the document's authenticity, but to discuss its implications. If the Queen Mother had set the foundation for bypassing traditional authority, and if Diana had reinforced it, and if the Clarion documents had structured it, then what exactly did Charles's reign stand on? Suddenly, every past decision, every ceremonial gesture, every silent glance between Catherine and the senior royals took on new weight. The public began asking questions no press office could deflect. What is the monarchy now? And who truly commands its soul? For decades, tradition had been the veil behind which the house survived. But now the veil had been torn. There were no denials left to give. The people had seen the vault. They had heard the tapes. They had read the codicils. And at the center of it all stood a woman who had never asked for the crown, but had been written into its destiny by hands far older, and perhaps far wiser, than anyone had imagined. As Britain stares at the ashes of veiled history, a single question remains: what happens when the truth buried by kings becomes the weapon of queens? Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.